Good afternoon. I'm Hannah Thibodeau. Welcome to CBC News Network. We have some breaking news on the recovery operation of the Titan submersible and the potential ramifications for its owner, OceanGate. But first to that breaking news, Canada's Transportation Safety Board has just announced it is launching a probe into the Titan's loss. That is because the Polar Prince, that is the support vessel that drops the Titan off. It also was a part of searching for it, was Canadian flag. Now, part of the release that was sent out by the TSB says that a team of investigators are traveling to St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador to gather information, to conduct interviews, and assess the occurrence. In the coming days, it says the TSB will coordinate the activities with other agencies involved. In fact, exactly what other agencies are involved, we're trying to get more information on the ground. We'll continue to bring you the latest on that as it happens. But satellite images show some of that international resources that rushed to the search area about 700 kilometers off St. John's. 9 vessels stayed in the area as of late yesterday. That costly effort included assets from personnel from Canada, the US, France, and Britain. As we say, some are staying to continue mapping the debris field about 500 meters from the Titanic. Others are returning to base. Now, we don't know how many people will launch any form of inquiries. We do now know that the TSB is. That's because OceanGate, is based in the U.S. It's operated in international waters. Coast Guard does not have a jurisdiction, so there's all these confusing things to it, but things continue to break as the day unfolds. We now know the TSB, the Transportation Safety Board of Canada, is launching an investigation. We'll continue to get more on that, but also Travis Danraj has more on the recovery operation from St. John's.
Well, this rescue operation has now turned into a recovery mission, and we know that a lot of the military assets that were out searching for Titan over the past several days are now returning to their home ports and to also their bases as well. There were military aircraft, there were ROVs, and there were also a number of ships that were out searching. The Polar Prince, which was essentially the mothership of the Titan, which tugged it out to that location in the North Atlantic where it dove to go see the wreckage of the Titanic. It is on its way back to the port of St. John's and should be arriving either late tonight or early tomorrow morning. So certainly there are questions right now in terms of this investigation and where it goes next. There are also questions about the timeline here in terms of when this catastrophic event on Titan occurred. U.S. media reporting that they have U.S. Navy sources that tell them that there was some sort of sound that was detected by U.S. Navy sensors, sonar that was underwater in that area of the Atlantic, that detected a likely implosion of the Titan submersible hours after the vessel began its fatal voyage on Sunday. So again, that's multiple U.S. media outlets reporting that. CBC News has not confirmed that information. Also, there have been a number of theories in terms of what may have possibly happened. Here's one explorer that was on the first mission to dive down to see the wreckage of the Titanic. Here's what he says he thinks happened.
The descent is the most dangerous part for a submersible, constantly increasing the pressure on the hull. And so that's when things going to fail. If you make it to your dive, the maximum depth that you're going to go to, you're generally okay at that point. You can conduct the rest of the dive with no problem.
James Cameron, the famous Canadian director that directed the famous film Titanic, also has a theory, and he doesn't think that anything happened actually on the way down, but the team on Titan likely noticed that there was something wrong. They were trying to get back to the surface, and that's when he thinks catastrophe happened.
The only way for the ship to know that they had dropped their ascent weights, which would be an emergency abort, is if they had called that in, that they were ascending. So I believe now that they had some warning, that they heard some acoustic signature of the hull beginning to delaminate. I actually believe they heard it with their ears, not through the sensor system, in the last moments of their lives, and that's quite a horrifying prospect.
Now, that part of a wide-ranging interview that Cameron did with Anderson Cooper of CNN, and I had a chance to speak to Anderson Cooper, who's here in St. John's covering this story, a little bit more about that interview, and particularly what comes next in terms of deep-sea exploration. He had that conversation with James Cameron. Here's what he told me.
The craft he designed was by his own specifications. It didn't go through the traditional maritime safety checks. But he said the difference is he would never have taken passengers on board the craft that he himself designed, that he was willing to take that risk. So I think there's going to be increasing questions about whether it was right for this company to bring passengers aboard an experimental craft that had not gone through maritime safety protocols that many in the industry was urging this company to put this craft through.
And in terms of whether or not bodies will be recovered, that is not likely to happen. At those depths, the military says, the Coast Guard says that there likely won't be any bodies found. And that really, when it comes to closure for the families, will be very difficult. We know that some families have put out statements already. Some families are questioning whether or not OceanGate, the company that owned Titan, alerted officials early enough that something had gone wrong, that they lost communication, and that perhaps has delayed the search. Oceanback pushing back on safety concerns as well that have been raised, saying that the vessel was safe. So a lot of questions, as I say, remain, and this investigation now into what exactly happened, repiecing the last voyage of the Titan together and actually piecing together the hull, well, that will also take place here in the coming months and years ahead. Travis Stanraj, CBC News, St. John's.
Just a quick update from our reporter on the ground, Travis Stanraj. He now says that the TSB have arrived at a hotel in St. John's. Again, the Transportation Safety Board has now launched an investigation because the Polar Prince, that is the ship that dropped off the Titan submersible and was a part of the search and rescue effort, search and recovery effort. It is under a Canadian flag. So now the Transportation Safety Board is saying it is investigating this incident. And as we hear from our Travis Stanraj on the ground, he is saying that those TSB investigators have arrived in St. John's, Newfoundland. Also, as Travis was mentioning, there are reports the U.S. Navy detected that sound, which is consistent with an implosion just hours after the Titan began its dive to the Titanic wreck on Sunday. CBC News has not confirmed those reports, but we did speak with an expert on underwater acoustics and asked him how the Navy might have heard that sound when they weren't listening for it.
If they were able to hear the sound, I would expect that somebody would have had to have been close. So there would have had to have been a Navy ship or a submarine in the area, or possibly an aircraft with sonobuoys in the water. But being unalerted and not knowing that anything was going on, I wouldn't expect that they would have heard anything before the search started.
The U.S. Coast Guard says it still does not know when or where the implosion happened. Also, experts say those banging noises that were heard earlier in this week that some had hoped were from the Titan were likely sounds coming from other ships in the area. Now, there are so many questions about the Titan, its safety record, and how it was allowed to take passengers to the ocean floor. You'd also might be wondering what laws exist, especially here in Canada, around submersibles. Well, we got some expert insights earlier into the Titan and the industry from Sal Mercogliano. He's a maritime historian at Campbell University in North Carolina.
Most submersibles that operate in the deep area are largely spherical objects built out of one material, steel, titanium. The difference with Titan was it was built out of two different materials, and it wasn't a sphere, but actually more like a cone or a tube shaped. The end caps were made of titanium, but the center hull, the round tube part where the passengers rode, was out of this carbon fiber material. And you have to join those two materials together. And the different shape, and because of the composite material, is what made this such an experimental craft. This was a very unique environment and a very unhospitable environment where any danger, any kind of flaw in this craft could result in the loss of it. And I think Canada's going to have to relook at what laws it has on the books regarding submersible expeditions that originate and end back in their ports.
Do you know much about Canada's laws on submersibles? I'm sorry, I don't.
Canada is very light on maritime laws in general because of the fact that there's not many ships that are currently registered in Canada. And so this is an area that's really going to need to be looked at. This industry, again, has been a very well self-regulated industry by establishing classification societies. And one of the reasons why classification societies are largely used has to do with insurance. And so I have a really big question about who insured this expedition for the liabilities that could have incurred with a loss like this.
So I'm just trying to clarify some things here because it's quite fascinating. Do you feel that they launched from Canada because maybe our laws are light, as you say?
No, I think the expedition stemmed from Canada because of its location close to the wreck site. But I do think that there were a kind of a void here in the use of such vessels. And again, you don't see the use. I mean, no one is really taking passengers down to to 4,000 meters. It's just a very unique nature that is Titanic. And I think we're really finding ourselves where we were in the beginning of the aviation industry, where corporations, governments, and very rich people were able to use aviation. Today, we think nothing about getting on an airplane and flying at 40,000 feet. I think we're going to be at a point in the submersible industry where people will go on a submersible, go down 14,000 feet without thinking. We're just not there yet.
Sal Mercogliano is a maritime historian at North Carolina's Campbell University.